So this week, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Debbie Busby, who is an accredited registered clinical equine behaviourist, and she runs her very successful international consultancy, Evolution Equine Behaviour. And she's been doing that since 2006. So Debbie knows a thing or two about horse behaviour. She supervises university master students and new behaviourists. She writes and lectures on all kinds of aspects of equine behaviour. She's also a practising psychotherapist, and she's developed a transactional analysis model to promote effective communication between horse owners and practitioners. She's currently, as if that doesn't keep her busy enough, she's currently conducting doctoral research into horse and human well-being in the spheres of riding and training horses. So, big warm welcome, Debbie. Really lovely to chat with you, because we do chat in our Pilates classes, don't we? We're both
We
in the same
do.
Pilates class,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
we don't get time to chat like this. So, it's really lovely to see you.
Oh, it's great to be here, Tracy, and thanks for inviting me.
So my very first question for you is, I suppose, how did it all start? So tell us, were you interested in horse or animal behavior from being young, from being a child, or was it something that developed a bit later on for you?
Oh, what a great question. And I remember that I've always been interested in animals in some way. Going back to one of my earliest memories, which was in the very olden days when I was little, we used to have people coming to the door to sell encyclopedias. And one of them, like say, just all about animals, I think, like a series of encyclopedias. So my mum, you probably got the first two free. Oh, I think my internet's going a bit unstable. We'll see how we get on. So I think my mum got the first two, and I was just enthralled. Couldn't keep my head out of those books. So
Wow.
they really incited an interest. And then, then I remember being really disappointed that we didn't get the rest of the series of the encyclopedias because probably you had to start paying for them then.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, so anyway, that got me really interested. I was always the one that looked after the guinea pigs at school and took them home for the holidays. And my also in the olden days, we had like you used to have latchkey children. Well, we had latchkey dogs in the village, and they
Yeah.
would be let out all day while their owners were getting on with whatever they were doing, and they'd just like pot around the village. And they'd have a sort of order of when they would come and visit us at home. And so, 10 o'clock, it was time for Blackie to come and visit, and Blackie would get a saucer of tea and a biscuit off my dad. And then 11 o'clock in the morning, Pickles would come, and the same routine. So I didn't have dogs at that age, but it was almost like I had lots of friends who were dogs. Um,
Brilliant.
I was always asking my parents for a pony. I mean, also at the time, the village was still rural and had quite a few farms with horses. We had we had a horse that delivered milk, that pulled the milk float that delivered milk. So that was a big thing that happened every day. And I was allowed to go and ride him. He must have been about 16 hands, and I was about 3 years old. So
Yeah,
when I say ride, I mean perch on top like a little pea.
yeah, yeah.
And so just seeing loads of horses around. So always asking my parents for a pony, looking out of the window every Christmas morning for the pony that didn't appear in the garden. But then when I was 8, my parents bought me a dog, Tim the poodle. So that was my first sort of family dog. And then by then I'd started learning to ride. Well, I'd started riding friends' ponies. And then also when I was 8, we, a friend and I started having proper riding lessons. So then that was just a lifetime that's started a lifetime of being interested in why animals do what they do and what do we want them to do? How do we get them to do it? What if they don't want to do it? all those questions I started asking at a really early age and have never stopped. So that's how I got into animals.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And you also, you're not only an equine behaviourist, you also look at dogs as well, don't you?
mm,
So I find that quite curious. I know a lot of horse owners have dogs and so on, but when you think of it from a behavioural point of view, you've got a prey and you've got a predator there. So is
yes.
that done consciously, or you just have a love of the both of them?
It was a love of the both of them, but it's like I started off. Dogs have always. I mean, before I started doing equine behaviour, I competed, taught, trained horses, taught riders. So my life, sort of professional life or semi-professional life, because I usually had a day job on the side as well, was all about horses, and dogs were my friends and companions that lived
Hmm.
with me. But so the first part of my animal behavior training was in horses. My first course that I did, proper course that I did was equine behavior, and that was the aim all the time. Then I wanted to get this, sort of highest level professional accreditation, which at the time was being a full member of the Association of Pet Behaviour Counsellors. And that's a bit of a weird thing that it's called. We call it
Hmm.
pet behaviour counsellors. And then there's this thing of, well, some people say horses are pets, some people say they're not. But anyway, equine behaviourists fell under that umbrella. And I wanted to be accredited at the highest level. Um, so I didn't have to do, but you had to do some sort of postgraduate qualification. So I chose to do applied animal behaviour and welfare. That was a master's, an MSc at Newcastle University at the time. And so the main species that you studied for that master's was dogs. So I kind of specialised in equine on that master's, but you couldn't help but learn all about dog behaviour as well.
Yeah.
And so it just made sense to me then to start professionally in dog behaviour because at the time I lived on the edge. So um, I lived somewhere where if you went one way, you had all of Cheshire, all the horsey people in
Yeah.
one direction, but in the other way was the whole of the Greater Manchester conurbation with hundreds of thousands of dog owners. So even from a business sense, it sounded like a sensible thing to do to sort of open my market up to
Yeah.
those dog owners as well. So now I'm really comfortable with both. And it's really interesting seeing the differences and similarities between the species. And some of those are surprising, like you say, so some of those are what you would expect, like prey and predator type behavior.
Yeah.
But others are surprisingly similar, like the underlying emotions that work to produce an observable behavior that we see
Yeah.
kind of on the ground or in real life is driven by similar emotions and motivations, same as humans as well,
Mm.
ultimately all to do with the ability to be able to survive and reproduce. And it all
Yeah.
starts from there, and then it sort of funnels or goes off in little branches like a tree
Yeah.
until we're doing things like half pass and flying change with our horses, whose primary motivation is to survive, get through
Yeah.
life, and that's the same as us, really, isn't it?
Yeah. 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 Definitely.
Get through life and feel good about it.
That reminds me of your book. You've got a book out, haven't you? I've got the
Yes,
title here, Equine Behaviour in Practice.
yes,
And because I think it's the first chapter is called something like The Thin Veneer of Equine Evolution, which
yes,
I just love that. I love the thin veneer. Can you tell me a
yeah.
bit more about that?
Yeah, oh, I can. And thanks for asking that question because it's something I like to bend people's ear about when I can. But it's actually the thin veneer of domestication.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Yeah.
and that's because different animals that we label as domesticated, like cats, dogs, horses, cattle, they didn't start off being our domesticated helpers. So there had to be a historical trajectory, kind of anthropological or anthrozoological trajectory of how it came to happen that those completely wild animals ended up being able, in the horse's case, to stay on their own in a field or live in a stable or travel in a trailer and be ridden. And for dogs, that trajectory was quite sort of affiliative. Dogs, it was a sort of a two-way effect of dogs got a lot from us, including friendliness and relationship and that sort of thing. And we got a lot from dogs. They could start to be early warning signals for anybody coming to a camp, or what else could they do? But they could be our hunting partners, that kind of thing. And that was all that was like a partnership, and that's interesting because that's how we want to see our relationship with our horse, isn't it, as a partnership?
Mm.
But the original domestication for horses didn't happen in the same way. So I can't remember what order these things happened in, but pretty sure the first thing that happened was that we hunted them for meat. So humans became a dangerous, threatening predator. So we hunted them for meat. Then we realized that we could milk the mares. So mares became,
Really?
yeah, so mares became useful to live close to, be able to be kept close to settlements. So then, I don't want to turn this into a massive lecture, but then we had to work out, well, how do we keep these wild things close to us to do that? So then things like tethering or corralling came
Mm.
into place. Then the horses, therefore, stayed closer to us on a more regular basis. Then that was so that have the mare's milk, but also the horses that sadly, were going to be like meat animals were closer, didn't have to
Yeah.
nobody had to expend a load of energy chasing them and trapping them
Yeah.
and that sort
Yeah.
of thing. So then that then was a sort of semi-enforced development of a relationship between the horse and the human. The horse learned, well, what do I have to do to like not have my worst life with this person? And the human had to learn, what do I have to do not to get kicked or bitten by this
Mm.
horse? And gradually, some relationships became more positive. Some horses were more affiliative than others, especially the foals who grew up knowing, oh God, speak Debbie, who grew up knowing nothing different than sort of,
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
in a corral and living with humans. So that's so that was so that's why I call it the thin veneer, because dogs chose in a very blunt sort of evolutionary domestication way. Dogs had more of a choice about coming to hang out with us, and they chose to do that. Horses less so, but they did come to sort of experience it as well. Well, it's kind of, I suppose it was a sort of continuum between this is my life, I can't do anything about it, or this is my life, I've got nice humans who hang out with me and feed me, and life's okay,
Yeah.
and I don't have any need to head off back into the steppe or wherever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's why. And so fast forward then to how we live our lives with horses and the expectations we have of them of just move to this, leave all your friends who
Yeah.
you've got this strong evolutionary drive to be in a settled group that you all know each other, you all know, what to do at the same time, who to run away from, when to run away at the same time. You just get used to living with that same group of horses. And then we expect them, like a bit like second-hand cars. We just expect to buy and
Yeah.
sell them, take them away from that group, off to a new yard. it might be because you've changed livery yards, or it might be because the horse has been sold. Either way, the horse is just like, well, what planet have I landed on now? Who are these
Yeah.
horses? Who are these people who are looking after me? And it takes them weeks or even months to adjust to that. But we expect to take them off to a show the first weekend they arrive, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
wonder why they're going up in the air or just not doing what we want them to do. So it's so easy because of that thin veneer of domestication. It's so easy for horses to start on that tiny little step of insecurity or, ooh, I'm not quite sure what's going on here. And if we don't pay attention to that, then that can start just a snowball of
Yeah.
problems. Whereas if we paid more attention to those little things and the early signs that the horse is not is even struggling really, but just having a bit of an eek moment, if we could
Yeah.
help them more at those times, then we could do whatever we all the things we want to do with our horse, like I did with Trusty Rusty, because that was my trajectory with my horse, and that was one of the other things that got me so interested in behaviour, because I had a horse that my first experience with him was just him bolting and rearing over backwards with me. I just at the time I thought, I mean, I could have when I was there, sat in the corner of the stable, sobbing, thinking, oh, don't want to sell. I love him already. I don't want to
Yeah.
sell
Yeah.
him. What am I going to do? Anyway, thankfully, I got the right help, found help, and to cut a long story short, he turned into, the dream pony. We went from strength to strength, did every discipline you could imagine, um, and had a fantastic life together. So that was because I was taught to listen to the tiny little signs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, I mean, we were talking before we started recording, weren't we, that lots of people don't realize that you can call in an equine behaviorist
Mm,
anytime, just like you would a vet or a farrier or a physio or something if something physical
yes.
was going wrong. You can call in the equine behaviorist to help you and support you through this and give you exercises and so on. So what does an equine behaviorist actually do then?
That's a good question. And sometimes, it's so interesting because I think, gosh, when I get phone calls, I think, oh, I really do need to get that message out a bit more about what we do and what we don't do. Um, because one thing I'm not is a trainer. I mean, I know how to train, obviously, because that was my job even before I became a behaviorist. Um, but there are, if you want somebody to train you to do, you know, medium dressage or go show jumping or anything like that, that's, there are coaches and instructors to do that.
Yeah.
So, so the way I sort of split the two apart is that I say a trainer is somebody who helps you when you want to do something with your horse, you want to learn to do X, Y, Z that you can't already do, or that you want to refine, then that's where a trainer or a coach comes in. And on the other hand, a behaviorist comes in when things are problematic. So when your horse is doing things that you don't want them to do and you don't know, and it's getting worse and you don't know how to fix it, and the advice that you've been getting from whoever you've been getting it from is making it worse. So you're trying to fix it and it's getting worse. So enter the equine behaviourist. So what we do is we sort of as a profession, what we do is we work to understand and address whatever the problem is. And there's a very strong scientific base to it. So we use a variety of scientific sources like animal behaviour science, animal welfare science, psychology, biology. But importantly, we also add to that mix our own knowledge and our own experience.
Mm.
So my role involves then investigating the root cause of whatever the unwanted behavior is or the behavior that's causing concern, because what a lot of people do is try to treat just the symptom. Um, can I think of an example? I'm thinking of, a horse who plants, a horse who won't go off the yard, for example, or who plants
Yeah.
a few yards after they've got off the yard, and people will they might go out with another horse and try to get a lead, which is
Yeah.
that's not it's not the worst idea, and it's part of what we would call a behavior modification plan. But
Yeah.
other people might think, oh, stick some spurs on, or just kick them more, or use my whip.
Yeah.
And because of um, how horses learn, and something about horses, again, this relates to domestication, the way that oh, there was another point I wanted to make about domestication, but I might come back to that later. But horses are in a sense, horses are easy to bully. If you think of how the
Mm.
damage, we know the damage they can do when things go wrong. And for example, I think vets is the profession that's got the highest proportion of injuries where people end up hospitalized. And um, other people who aren't vets end up, we all know somebody who's been
Yeah.
hospitalized, and
Yeah.
they talk about it. It's described as my horse put me in hospital. Well, actually, the situation that you set up put you in hospital.
Mm.
um I remember, I don't know if it happens so much now, but I remember when I used to event, actually the same. I used to event, and I also used to go and watch motorcycle racing, and you always saw a greater proportion of people in wheelchairs at both those events because of injuries that they'd
Yeah.
had doing their sport,
Yeah.
which I suppose, which even again, safety. I know that you can think, well, that wasn't to do with behaviour, that was an accident, but there's a big link between safety. There seems to be, and I was one of these. I mean, flipping heck, the courses that I used to go herring round, and the drag hunting Cheshire
Mm.
lines that I used to do. Um, and I used to just go off herring round them, not thinking of any risk at all. Um, but there was. So there is, and when Trusty Rusty arrived, and he was a rearer. There's a sort of meme, isn't there? If that's the right word, in the horse world of, just never ever buy or keep a horse that rears. It's supposedly the worst thing
Yeah.
that a horse can do. Well, I don't believe that, but I've gone off on such a massive tangent now that I forgot where this started. Oh, about what does a behaviourist do? So, and the link between safety, safety is an important aspect that we often forget. We think we've got to do these things with our horses, like ride a horse that rears, or do other dangerous things because of a horse's behavior problem. And in fact, we don't have to do them. There are easy ways to resolve behavior problems if you try, instead of trying to stop the horse displaying the behavior that's problematic to you, if we look back to what was the root cause of that behavior, how did that behavior start? Might have come on over time, or it might have been a single event that caused the horse to see something as problematic, and then use the wonders of science and scientific knowledge, plus our own. It's not just science. I've got this thing about people saying it's all about science, because it isn't. Because the other, just as important, is the relational aspect with your horse, and um, the feel that you develop as somebody who
Mm.
communicates regularly with horses, which we all do. Our horses are communicating with us all the time, or trying to, and we're trying to communicate the right thing to our horse. So
Yeah.
look for the root cause, develop a tailored behavior modification plan that supports that horse's well-being and achieves the owner's goals. And work through that plan with the owner to get to where the owner wants to get to. Um, but an important point about that is that those two things have got to align, the well-being of the horse and
Yeah.
the owner actually, and the owner's goals have got to match up. So there's sometimes conversations to be had about expectations and
Yeah.
managing those expectations. And it's a bit, every case is like detective work, like every case is different. Um, and so, yeah, the aim is always to understand what started the problem off, what's keeping it going now, and how I can help. And just one other thing is that so I realise I'm wittering on. You might want to ask other questions.
No,
Um,
no, keep going, keep
oh,
going.
right.
It's
Okay.
fascinating.
Um, an important point about what we call problem behaviour is that it's a problem to us. Whatever the
Mhm.
horse is doing is a problem to us. But for the horse, it's often normal, natural, even instinctive physiological behaviour that they're expressing in order to try and either get further away from something that's worrying them or get closer to something that's attracted them or makes them feel
Yeah,
secure. And so it's, we could just as easily say that if you were looking at it through the horse's lens, they might be saying, well, it's my human that's got the behavior problem.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I wish I had a human behaviorist to
yeah,
help me with my human's behavior. And in a sense, that's what I do. And because of my psychotherapy work as well, so I do a fair bit of work with, directly with people without going through their animals. So I can do both of those things to help the horse with their human's behavior and help the
I love
person with
that.
their horse's behavior.
I love
Yeah,
that.
that
I
was
love
a
that.
long-winded reply.
No, no, because and well, it's a long reply because you do a lot basically.
Mm.
And I suppose no 2 days are the same. What kind of problems do people come to you with for their horses?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's a wide range, really. I mean, I might be called out to help a horse who's struggling to load into a trailer, or a horse who won't be tacked up or becomes aggressive,
Mm,
biting or kicking out during grooming or tacking up. They might buck, they might rear, they might show separation anxiety. They might have become very aggressive. They might not want to be caught.
yeah,
Um, what else? A lot of them are which I haven't developed a better word for yet, but it's kind of general unhandleability is what I call
mm,
it. So it
yeah,
is, a horse that can't lead calmly, or a horse that fidgets when they're tied up and being groomed, which again brings in the human side because for some people that's not a problem at all, but for other people it prevents them going further and getting on their horse and riding.
yeah,
Um, and then lots of problems because of what I said before about horses, how problematic it is for a horse to be just, whisked away from one yard and plonked on another.
yeah,
A lot of problems to do with horses not wanting to leave the yard, horses planting, horses not wanting to go in the arena, or horses, once they're in the arena, just turning themselves inside out and not being able to settle and work.
yeah,
So those
yeah.
sorts of things, yeah.
Gosh, that's a lot, isn't
Yeah,
it? That is
it
quite a
is.
lot. And
Yeah.
it must be quite
Yeah.
difficult to assess sometimes the absolute root cause of it. Or do you have a
Mm.
model that you might not get the specific for that horse, but you can make a very educated guess at what the root was?
Yes, that's right. And the way that I do that is how I run my consultations, which is I take the longest case history you could ever imagine. So the the lovely client, the first thing they have to do is fill in a very, very detailed questionnaire for me.
Mm.
which includes, so that includes everything from tell me about your relationship with your horse to very detailed what do they eat every day, what's their turn in, turn out routine, what tack do you ride them in, what work do you do with them, what do you see, what observations do you have. So if they're, hopefully they do get turned out, but not all horses do, of course. What do you see them doing when they're living their own life in the field? Do you
Yes.
see
Yeah.
them interacting with other horses, grazing, browsing, rolling, trotting, running, having that, mad 5 minute gallop round,
Yeah.
that sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
So I do, so that just gives me a really, really deep picture of the horse's life and the horse's personality, I suppose, and the how the owner experiences that problem. And also, another important bit that I ask them is things like, when did the problem start? Give me, tell me what the first, so describe the first time that the problem happened, tell me what happened, tell me the most recent time it happened and describe that to me, and tell me another significant event, and tell me what was happening before the problem thing happened, what was the problem behavior, and what happened afterwards, because that's an important piece, is to know from the horse's perspective, what did the horse, what was it that was causing the problem for the horse? It isn't
Yeah.
always, it's usually something that the owner wasn't aware of. And then another important thing is, what is the consequence for the horse? So, what happened? The horse did the thing that was the problem for the owner. What was the consequence? So for example, if a horse, say, well, this is, no, I think, yeah, this is a good example, I think, because if we think of booking, so say a horse was working in the arena and then started booking, and the rider just got stronger, or gave
Yeah.
it some smacks on the
Yeah.
bum.
Yeah.
Then from the horse's point of view, what happens, what if that horse was booking because they had just experienced a bit of soreness, or
Yeah.
something, they'd had a twinge,
Yeah.
and they booked because of that, and the owner interpreted it as the horse being naughty. They gave the horse a smack. So then the horse learns, well, every time I book, I get smacked. And so, yeah, with some horses, what that will be enough. That will stop them booking. But that's an example of treating the symptom and not the problem, because
Mm.
the horse will think, oh, well, not, I mean, the horse will not cognitively think in the way that we do, but because we can't get into their brains and know that whether they do think the same way as us or not. But the horse learns that something not good happens when they
Yeah.
book. And so for some horses, that will stop them booking. But what you haven't done, if that horse was twingy or sore, you haven't addressed that. And that could be something that could develop into
Yeah.
some worse kind of injury, or physical dysfunction. So then what happens is that horse. So then in that situation, the owner doesn't even realize they've got a problem,
Yeah.
because they've
Yeah. Yeah.
done they've done what all of us were probably taught to do when we were little, and so then the horse just sort of carries on working as the rider wants them to do. But some horses will not respond like that. Some horses will get worse. They'll think, well, I don't like that whippy thing that's hurting me. I'm going to book more, or I'm going to bolt. Or after a few times of that happening, they're going to think, oh, I know what happens when I go in that arena, so I'm just not going to go there. So, and that's
Yeah.
when you get situations like horses not wanting to go in the arena, and the owner will say, I've got no idea why he doesn't want to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But from from me taking that case history, I'll see exactly straight away that that was the problem. So that's what I'd get from the case history questionnaire, and then I'll go and do a visit, of course, and ask a load more questions and talk to the owner, see them doing things what they generally do with their horse. But importantly, from an ethical point of view, it's important that I don't ask the owner to put the horse in a situation that's going to cause poor welfare for the horse.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't want to watch them doing a bit of work and building up to the horse booking, because that
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
show that the horse was in a poor mental state just at that moment, or they might even be in
Mm.
pain. And I can usually see before the point where the horse books, I can usually see that the things I was talking about before, which are those subtle signs of
Yeah.
tension or discomfort that or unsettledness that most riders would think, oh, I'm just going to ride through that. But it's
Yeah.
important to
Yeah.
listen to those things.
Yeah.
So yeah, does that um is that all right for that? Did that
Yeah,
for
yeah,
that question?
that's really good. That gives me a really good insight
Right.
into how detailed it is. And
It is,
one of
yeah.
the things that you said before was, anyone can call themselves an animal or equine behaviorist. You can
Mm,
just do it, you can just have the title. So, what marks you out then? What qualifications do you need to be an accredited clinical behaviorist like you are?
yeah. You need so to be a clinical behaviourist, and so we're very it's quite a few professional, well, not quite a few professional bodies, there's two or three professional bodies.
Yeah,
So the names are a bit different. It could be, certified, accredited, registered, but it all means that we can work on, well, like it says on the tin, a clinical basis where we're taking the case history and using a systematic, structured method to work through what the underlying causes are in a very diagnostic way.
yeah,
And therefore, and it's through that diagnostic procedure that we are able to then decide which out of a number of options would be the best treatment plan. And I know I'm sort of waffling a bit before I get to the qualifications bit, but the other important point about clinical behaviourists who are on one or more of these professional body registers is that we always get vet referrals. So we always work closely with vets.
yeah.
So if somebody asks us to help with their horse's behaviour, we ask them who their vet is, and we contact the vet and
Mm,
say, almost like get consent to work with their client on a client's horse, on a behavioural basis, because it
yeah,
is legally vets are responsible for the well-being of their patient, the horse, the welfare and the well-being, and that is not just the physical welfare, it's the mental welfare and well-being as well, and that's the area that behaviourists are working in. And
yeah,
that, another little tangent is, like the example that I gave before, especially with horses, because of what we do with them, there are quite often pain is contributing to unwanted behaviour. So it's really important to know when to refer back
yeah,
to that vet and
yeah,
when to get the vet involved. So what you need is a suitable undergraduate degree. So that could be equine science. Mine was human psychology,
yeah,
actually. Animal behavior or zoology.
yeah,
That so that's your undergraduate, and then you need a postgraduate qualification, which relates to So each of these bodies, these professional bodies, have criteria for membership, which are knowledge and understanding criteria.
Mm.
And then, so that's what you know and how you understand it. And then there are also what we call performance criteria, which are how you go about applying your knowledge in your clinical practice. So there could be a variety of master's degrees that you could get, but they would all have to demonstrate that knowledge, that range of knowledge and understanding performance criteria that
Yeah.
the professional bodies want. And just to say, just to add that the overarching, so there's a number of professional bodies in the UK, the overarching umbrella that sort of oversees all of them is called the Animal Behaviour and Training Council, and they work closely with the government on.
Right.
So it's kind of, I mean, government's got a lot of other problems that it thinks is higher up its agenda than animal training and behaviour. But if there is, so they'll work closely with DEFRA, for
Yeah.
example,
Yeah.
on anything to do with companion animal behaviour and welfare. So that's the overarching body. What was I saying? Oh, about how you what qualifications you need. So yes, so you get your master's or your postgraduate diploma, then you join one of these organisations. So you could join the Fellowship of Animal Behaviour Clinicians, or you could join the Association of Pet Behaviour Counsellors. For they're the two main ones for equines, and that you're sort of in what do you call it? You're in, can't think of the word, but then you start. That's where you start learning your practice,
Right.
really learning
Yeah.
about um, how to how to actually become a clinical practitioner. So you do that through the master's or the postgraduate diploma that you had done would normally have started to introduce you to how you run a consultation. And
Yeah.
then you learn more about that via CPD, supervision, shadowing other practitioners like me. That's what I do a lot of
Yeah.
now is supporting new practitioners coming through. So you then um, you get more and more proficient at doing consultations in with the support of more experienced behaviourists. And
Yeah.
then when you think you're ready, you apply for assessment. So you apply to be assessed, and that's another big part of my job nowadays is being on that assessment panel
Yeah.
for people who it's like a Viva, I suppose.
Yeah.
You can demonstrate your knowledge and understanding because of the academic qualification that you've got,
Yeah.
and in there's also an opportunity to come up via accreditation of prior learning now as well, and then you have your Viva type assessment, which asks you about your clinical practice, how you apply your knowledge to your clinical
Mm.
practice. You might be observed, or you might be asked to submit a video of
Yeah.
your consultation. And if you pass that process, it's very rigorous and quite it takes quite a while. But it's got to be
Yeah.
because we're almost, we're working in conjunction with vets all the time, and we don't. I mean, those that list of examples of cases that I see was the day-to-day types of things, but we're also asked, like I've been one of my cases last year, one of my most complex cases was a box walking stallion, show jumping stallion, who'd he'd cha- he'd just box walked continuously for so long, and he wasn't allowed out. He wasn't let out because he'd just,
Mm.
you know, jump over everything to get to the mares. He'd done that so much that he'd changed his musculature because he went in the same direction all the time.
Oh, wow.
So and then so then they thought, well, we'll just deal with this by tying him up so he can't
Oh,
walk.
wow.
Another example of trying to stop the
Yeah,
symptom that you can see. So
yeah.
then he developed this really weird nervous tick with his neck. And so when you get faced with that kind of problem, or really abject aggressive cases where a horse has really massively injured another horse or a
Mm.
person, um, you have really got to know what you're doing in
Yeah,
those cases. You know,
yeah,
it's you can't just get what I call a rope thrower, or somebody less trained, really,
yeah,
who
yeah.
you know by chance they might do the right thing, but also by chance they might do something that would make it so much worse. And we
Mm.
all know, if you can't, we know what happens to a horse that doesn't meet their owner's expectations.
Yeah,
It's a downward trajectory then, isn't it, to
yeah, yeah.
being sold on and on and on. So until yeah. So um, why did I start saying that? Oh, yeah, because of that. Because though that is the route to being qualified
Yeah,
as
yeah,
behaviourist. And I've got that
yeah,
actually. There's an article on my website. I've got a blog which explains that route as
yeah,
well. So
yeah. Yeah, so I mean that
yeah.
once you get somebody who is accredited, then you know that they are highly qualified, really qualified in
Mm.
all kinds of behaviors, like you say, some of the more extreme cases as well.
Yes, yeah. And
So,
the other thing is that you know that they're accountable because we all have to abide by a code of practice and a
yes.
code of conduct. So, and we're all insured. That's an important thing as well. We've got
Mm.
professional indemnity insurance, public liability insurance. So, those are important factors to think about as
Yeah,
well. Yeah.
yeah. So,
Mm.
for anyone that is interested in horse behavior, I want to just mention your book again because I know
Yeah.
you won't. So,
Oh, yeah.
Equine Behaviour in Practice. So,
Yes.
I mean, the title kind of tells you what it's about, but can you tell us a little bit more about what it's about and who's it aimed at?
Yes, yeah. So um so I wrote it for anybody who works professionally with horses. So that's vets or students, behaviourists, trainers, but it's also importantly accessible for owners who want to understand their horses better. So I've combined in it science, various kinds of, scientific disciplines, case studies, communication theory or communication practice, really, in terms of how you communicate with the human half of the
Yeah.
relationship as well as the horse, and the real world context to show how behavior problems develop and importantly how they can be resolved. So, and this is where I sit a lot of the time. I wanted to create a book that bridges theory and practice. So it's something that reflects really the lived complexity of equine
Mm.
behavior, the difficulties that we don't always realize on both sides, really, I suppose, about, the fish out of water aspect
Yeah.
of the horse's day-to-day life, but also the difficulties that owners have that they don't sometimes even don't want to speak up about or don't do anything about because they don't know that there is something they can do about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there is something they can do about it. And if they don't know what they can do about it, then I and my colleagues know what they can do about it. So it encourages empathy and critical thinking at the same time. And for I think for equine students on a range of courses like equine science or equine vet students, it gives you a head start in acing any behaviour modules that you might have and or assessments or assignments, and especially for anybody working towards professional assessment as an equine behaviourist. I want it to serve as a manual for the essential knowledge and understanding, plus, importantly, the clinical skills that you need to run an effective behaviour consultation. So yeah, I was delighted that Taylor and Francis accepted my proposal for it, and now it's out there on the shelves.
Yay.
Yeah,
And
feels
we
good.
can get it at Amazon and all those good places.
Yes, you can. You can
Okay.
see how fantastic I am at pushing my own book, aren't you? Yes, it's available at all good booksellers and directly from Taylor and Francis or and Routledge. Probably it's on Routledge's website under the Taylor
Okay.
and Francis banner. So
Super.
yes, that's where it can
So
be
I'll
obtained.
put a link down in the description box as well. Um,
Great, thanks.
and where can we find you on the internet? Where can we find you on socials? All that kind of good stuff.
Gosh, right. So my website is called Evolution Equine Behaviour. My Facebook page is also called something like Evolution Equine Behaviour, Debbie Busby, Clinical Equine Behaviourist, something
Okay.
close to
I'll
that.
find it. I'll put it in the description box.
Um, on on my sadly ignored Instagram. I mean, I'm the one that ignores it, not other people. So yeah, I post on Instagram very rarely, but I do have an Instagram account, which is something else, something like equine, might be Debbie Busby Equine Behaviour. I've got a group, private Facebook group, free, which anybody's welcome to join, and that's called Alien in My Stable. And I called it that because I just have so many times when owners have said to me, and actually I had this same experience as well with my horse, of saying, I don't know who that thing is in my stable. I expected a horse that I could hang out with, groom, tack up, go off and do all the things I want to do. And I've got something in there that I don't understand and I don't know what to do with. It's like having an alien in my stable. So that's why I called it that. Um, I think those are all my socials. They're
Okay.
the main ones anyway,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
website. Yeah.
Yeah. Lovely. I will put those all in the description box. Thanks ever so much, Deb.
Super.
That has been really, really informative.
Oh,
Really
great. You're
enjoyed
welcome.
that. Thanks so much. Take care.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tracy.